The anime begins in a world where VR games are super popular. However, at that time, not all games are good. Some are really bad, and people call them dregs games. There's a student named Rakuro Hizutome who loves these bad games and is known as a dregs game hunter. Even though he's obsessed with gaming, he's pretty popular at school because he's friendly and good-looking, so some girls like him. One day, a girl named Rei went to talk to Rakuro, but before she could, her friend got there first. After school, Rei went to a game shop Rakuro often went to, hoping to meet him. But when Rakuro showed up, she got shy and hid. At that time, Rakuro had just finished playing a really terrible game called a.k.a. and wanted to find a better one. But it was tough because a.k.a. was the worst game he ever played. Rakuro liked beating up a troublesome female character in a game because it made him really happy. He had many bad games downloaded, and someone suggested he try Shangri-La Frontier, which is a popular VR game with lots of players. Just by reading reviews, he learned about the game's good points, but it was hard to find any problems because fans covered them up. When he played it, Rakuro created a character with 2 swords and focused on getting strong weapons rather than armor. So his character looked unusual with minimal equipment. He named his character Sunraku and entered the game world of SLF. It was different from other games because he could move freely, like in the real world. Since he chose to be a wandering character, he found himself in a forest. But he quickly met enemies, starting with goblins. There, Sunraku defeated them with ease. Then he faced a fast and dangerous rabbit monster. Luckily, the rabbit only attacked his character's neck, so he could predict its moves. After fighting more monsters, he realized he was far from the beginner's town. Instead of turning back, he decided to keep going, but had to defeat strong enemies before entering the next city. At that time, Rei found out that Rakuro was playing SLF, so she quickly logged in and tried to find him in the beginner's city. Unfortunately, Rakuro had already left the city, so Rei couldn't locate him. Turns out, Rei's presence in the beginner's city attracted attention because she was a top player in the game. On the other hand, Sunraku faced a tough challenge, a guardian snake. He was confident he could win without getting hurt by carefully observing its movements. However, his character had very low defense, so even one hit from the snake would be fatal. When Sunraku attacked, his weapon broke because the snake's skin was so tough. When he tried using a more powerful weapon, he got hit by poison that reduced his life every 10 seconds. Despite the difficult situation, he didn't give up. He decided to defeat the snake with a series of critical attacks, which required hitting the head, but the monster kept dodging. At that moment, Sunraku almost got eaten by the monster due to a small mistake, but he never gave up until he finally defeated it. However, he couldn't celebrate for long because he needed to go to the inn quickly before the poison took his character's life. Sunraku's first city in the game was Sekendo. People saw him in a negative light because he was wearing a bird mask and was nearly naked. Realizing this, Sunraku immediately went to the shop and bought the cheapest clothes available. He didn't mind wearing ugly clothes because he wanted to use his money to buy weapons. Unfortunately, the shop's weapons weren't great, so he needed to craft his own and find the materials himself for a better sword. To make a sword, Sunraku had to find iron ore in the swamp area. This was a time-consuming task, and even after mining for 30 minutes, he only found 2 pieces of iron ore. To make things even more challenging, he had to deal with swamp frogs that got in his way. After 3 hours of hard work, Sunraku finally collected enough materials to make a sword. Surprisingly, besides the iron ore, he also found a rare item called a swamp fossil. He decided to use the fossil to create an excellent dagger. As it started getting dark in the game, an NPC warned Sunraku to be cautious of dangerous nocturnal monsters. Instead of being scared, Sunraku was excited to try out his new weapon. Following advice from a weapon seller, he realized that nighttime monsters were indeed tougher and more vicious. He struggled even against regular goblins, let alone the unique monsters that no other player had ever defeated. This experience made Sunraku realize that he had underestimated the game's challenges. Meanwhile, Rei got word from another player that they had seen Sunraku. When she asked where he was, the player mentioned that Sunraku had rushed to Sekendo after being poisoned by a snake. Upon hearing this, Rei rewarded the player and set out to find Sunraku. By looking at the emblem on her coat, the player realized that Rei was part of a special monster hunter clan. In the game, there were 7 unique monsters, and out of 30 million players, no one had been able to defeat them. At the same time, Sunraku was in a battle with a special monster called Lycagon, known as the Night Killer. When Lycagon showed up, all the other monsters vanished instantly, making Sunraku think he would surely be defeated if he got hit by Lycagon's attack. To defend himself, Sunraku quickly used a skill that could block all of the monster's attacks. He also increased his speed and aimed for Lycagon's vulnerable spots. Despite landing powerful blows on the monster many times, Lycagon remained unharmed. Meanwhile, Sunraku's weapons were nearly worn out. Actually, Lycagon was an opponent he couldn't handle at the moment. But even when Sunraku often faced game glitches and various challenges in the game world, meeting such a formidable opponent made the game even more thrilling for him. Although he was defeated this time, he vowed to someday come back and defeat Lycagon for sure. After failing to defeat Lycagon, Sunraku received a curse mark from him. This mark had several effects. It made him scared of weaker monsters, improved his interactions with NPCs, and boosted his resistance to magic in the curse mark section of the game. Besides all of that, Sunraku said he couldn't wear protective gear until he defeated Lycagon. This curse, of course, made things more difficult for him. If you think about it, it's like playing a tough video game. So he needed to approach it with a positive attitude and a calm mind. After earning a bunch of experience points, Sunraku used them to boost his abilities. Even though he leveled up, he still had very low health, so he would get knocked out with just one hit, as his life force was only 6. Sadly, his only advantage was his luck stat, so Sunraku really hoped for some good luck now. Not long after, a rabbit appeared in front of him. The rabbit seemed to be leading him somewhere, so Sunraku thought he might get a rare item if he successfully followed it. However, it turned out that the rabbit led him to the entrance of a special scenario in the land of rabbits. Inside, Sunraku found a place inhabited by Vorpal bunnies. As a newbie player who could hold his own against Lycagon, the ruler of the land became interested in Sunraku and invited him to their palace. Because they believed he had a strong Vorpal spirit, their leader Fash agreed to personally train him. There, Sunraku considered this offer to be valuable training, so he had no reason to decline and accepted it right away. Fash then assigned his son, Emil, to take care of Sunraku. However, since he had been playing for a while, Sunraku wanted to take a break before starting his training. He also wanted to gather information about the unique monsters and scenarios he was encountering. Just before he left, Fash gave him a Vorpal soul necklace. This necklace would reduce the XP he earned, making progress slower, but in return, his abilities would increase more when he leveled up. On the other hand, Ray wanted to meet Rakuro at the game shop, but Rakuro hadn't been there recently. When Mana asked if Ray had found him, Ray explained that they were searching for a player named Sunraku based on Rakuro's instructions. Unfortunately, Ray missed the starting point of the game, so they couldn't find Sunraku. Meanwhile, Rakuro was searching for information about a game scenario called Rabbit Country on an online forum. He noticed that his situation was different from most other players, because there was no information available about the boss rabbit or how to enter his castle. After reading the forum, Rakuro decided to play a game called BOP. BOP is a niche fighting game with fewer than 100 daily players, but it's still accessible for anyone to play. Despite being considered a niche game, BOP has its own unique appeal. Players can engage in battles with freedom and even exploit glitches in the game system to gain an advantage. At that time, Sunraku shared his experience with Katsuo, claiming to have played SLF. At first, Katsuo thought it was a joke, but Sunraku explained what kept him hooked. He mentioned the existence of extremely powerful monsters called the 7 Colossi, which no player had been able to defeat so far. Sunraku attempted to fight one of these Colossi, but couldn't emerge victorious. After hearing about it, Katsuo and some other big fans of niche video games became curious and wanted to give it a try. While exploring the city with Emil, they came across some female players who were interested in a cute rabbit character. They wanted to learn how to keep it a secret. At that time, Sunraku decided to avoid them and run away, but one of the girls managed to take a picture of the rabbit to find more information on the game forum. Later on, Sunraku decided to test if the game's monsters were scared of a special mark he had. After chasing and defeating a monster, he quickly moved on to face the area boss. This boss was located in a muddy area, which made it challenging for him to move around. When his opponent came sliding towards him in the mud, Sunraku skillfully avoided the attack. As his enemy prepared to strike, Sunraku defended himself and counterattacked with a move called the Riven Counter skill. However, he couldn't keep this up forever, and he needed some time before he could use his skills again. Luckily, Emil had her own attacking abilities. When the enemy got close, Emil immediately used her magic skill to attack. Sunraku, who was used to playing solo, had forgotten that he now had friends to rely on. Although he didn't want to rely on the NPCs who were stronger than him, he realized it was a valuable opportunity. While the enemy was down, Sunraku approached and launched an attack, climbing up by thrusting his double daggers. Then, Emil was asked to use a powerful magic spell. The attack hit its target, but the monster suddenly disappeared and reappeared, hitting Sunraku and potentially causing him to lose the game. To prevent this, Emil used skills that harnessed kinetic energy to avoid losing life and hurt the enemy. This strategy led to the defeat of the area boss. After defeating the area boss, Sunraku and Emil headed to the third city. Before entering, Sunraku thought of a way to help Emil blend in. Emil used a special tool that could transform her into a human, so she wouldn't look out of place when entering the city. However, Sunraku worried that people might still be suspicious because she was with a man who had a bird's head. When they reached the city gate, the guards immediately became suspicious of Sunraku. To avoid drawing too much attention, Emil tried to explain Sunraku's unique situation, but her explanation was too long and confusing, which left the guards perplexed. Nevertheless, they allowed him to enter the city, but the people there seemed cautious around him. This unusual reaction was due to a player who had previously posted photos on a forum. Originally, the player had posted the photo to learn how to tame the Vorpal bunny. However, the post received a lot of comments from curious users. Besides discussing the tamed rabbit, they were also intrigued by the tattoo on Sunraku's body, which some connected to the curse mark of Lycagon, the Bat Killer. Since then, Sunraku became famous and was treated like a special event boss, becoming a target for veteran players. On the other hand, Pencil Soldier is an old friend of Sunraku in the game unit round. Initially, the game was designed as a massive online role-playing game or called as MMORPG, where each player acted as a knight protecting the kingdom from enemies. However, due to the high difficulty level, players started taking shortcuts instead of searching for scarce materials or herbs. Some chose to steal from NPCs or other players. Amidst this chaos, Pencil Soldier managed to conquer the kingdom. Meanwhile, Sunraku and Katsuo had previously challenged Pencil Soldier, and their battle ended in a tie. Now, Sunraku encounters Pencil Soldier again, but this time, Pencil Soldier has changed her name to Pencilgun in the SLF game. Pencilgun was already well known as the second-ranked member of the Assassin clan, earning the nickname Giant Killer. While they used to be evenly matched, Pencilgun's level and equipment had become significantly higher, making it challenging for Sunraku to keep up. Nevertheless, Sunraku continued to fight back, repelling every attack and relying on his fighting skills. Meanwhile, Emil was also experiencing changes in her body, forcing Sunraku to retreat and update his appearance point. Turns out, at that time, the Ashurakai clan had not only sent Pencilgun, but also 4 other members to capture Sunraku and extract information from him. Animelia, who had a strong interest in Emil, decided to assist Sunraku. She used her magical abilities to try to stop Pencilgun from getting close to Sunraku. However, all her attacks were reflected because Pencilgun had an item that could deflect them. Even though Sunraku faced 4 players simultaneously, he wasn't afraid. He believed he could still evade some attacks without using his special abilities, but the real challenge was finding a way to damage higher-level players. As they were about to launch their attack, a player suddenly defeated them with a single move. When this player arrived, everyone recognized him as the attack master. This made Sunraku suspicious and wary of him, considering him a great opponent. In reality, this player was Rei, the woman who had been pursuing Sunraku. Because of this incident, Rei had been desperately trying to find Sunraku in the game. When she received information about his whereabouts, she rushed to protect him from the Assassin clan, who were targeting him. Rei hoped that by doing this, she could get closer to Sunraku. Ever since Rei first saw Rakuro, he always appeared joyful and enthusiastic when discussing games with his friends. This piqued Rei's interest, especially since she was a member of the martial arts club. However, she was too hesitant to approach him directly, so she often followed him secretly from a distance. To get closer to him, Rei tried talking to Rakuro and playing games with him. She really wanted to interact with him, but when they first met in a game, it was a bit awkward. Sunraku thought Rei was trying to steal something special he had in the game, so he said sorry and quickly moved away from her character. But Rei was still happy because Rakuro talked to her. This made her feel good, so she kept playing and beat anyone who annoyed her. Meanwhile, Sunraku is getting ready for the training that Fash mentioned earlier. At the same time, Pencilgon messaged him saying she lost a game and invited him to play another one with Katsuo. To join the training, Sunraku went to the Vorpal Coliseum. There, Enmol told him he had to fight 10 different kinds of monsters there. Sunraku wanted to prove himself to Pencilgon, so he was determined to train hard and level up. However, when he faced the first monster, he got discouraged because he expected a one-on-one battle. But there were multiple monsters of the same kind, and they were much stronger than him. Meanwhile, Rei is thinking about Sunraku and plans to offer him her friendship. After the 7th trial, Sunraku finally figured out who the leader of the monster group was. By defeating the leader, the group became easier to defeat. After defeating the first type of monster, he continued training without a break. But after defeating the 9th monster, he was disappointed because his level only increased by 1. In the 10th battle, Fash showed up with a powerful monster he had captured. At that time, Sunraku couldn't defeat it in his current state, so the only way to win was to survive for 5 minutes. And in the 10th battle, Sunraku had to face a magical tree monster. At first, he thought it would be easy because he only had to survive for 5 minutes. But when the monsters started attacking, he was in for a surprise because the monster's movements were very hard to predict. Sunraku realized that 5 minutes was actually a long time in a tough fight like this. He had to keep running and dodging the monster's attacks without a break. Whenever he saw an opening, he tried to fight back, but his attacks didn't even scratch the monster. As the battle went on, the tree monster unleashed new attacks, using its roots, chains, and casting various types of magic. The monster's attacks became more frequent and intense, making Sunraku struggle just to avoid getting hit. He felt like giving up at one point, but he remembered that he had been giving up too easily lately. So he stayed focused in trying to find the monster's weaknesses. This way he could survive until the last 5 minutes and successfully complete his training. Meanwhile, after finishing his training, Fash acknowledged Sunraku as an honorary citizen, and he removed Vorpal's soul necklace, so Sunraku's experience points went back to normal. Sunraku was really hoping for a reward, but it seemed like Fash had no intention of giving him one. Besides the recognition, Sunraku got a bonus for a unique scenario, but he didn't know how to start it, so he decided to put it off and keep exploring. Before heading to the next area, Sunraku was worried that other players might target him if he went out looking like he did. There, Enmol suggested he cover all his body parts. Luckily, she knew a good place to buy the necessary items. Sunraku thought he'd get something cool, but it turned out to be just a plain cloth that covered his whole body. Unfortunately, wearing it actually made him stand out more and attract attention, but he had to wear it until he left the city. The next place they'd planned to explore was the Prismatic Forest Cave, a huge maze filled with colorful flowers and plants. However, before they could go, Sunraku bumped into Siguro, who had been watching him. However, the leader of Azurakai was not happy with his members, who couldn't get any information from Sunraku. They tried to blame Siguro for getting in their way, but they were still ordered to extract information from Sunraku at all costs. At that time, Pencilgon agreed that it was fine to take care of the rabbit, but she was more focused on unique monsters and didn't want to get involved with this issue. Meanwhile, Sunraku, who was dealing with Siguro, started having some strange thoughts. He was worried about upsetting Siguro because he had stepped on his head, so he quickly ran away from the area before Siguro could approach him. Soon after, the Azurakai clan was searching for Sunraku in the city. When they realized that Sunraku was wearing unusual equipment, they followed him and called for help. To trick them, Sunraku ran towards the ruins. When they fell for the ruse and gathered at the gate area, he turned back and headed for the Prismatic Forest Cave. At that time, Sunraku felt safe for a moment, but Sumi was surprised to find Siguro behind him, sending him a friend request. Sunraku didn't understand why he was being offered a friend request. He thought that Siguro might be trying to get close to him and hoping to get information voluntarily. Despite his suspicions, Sunraku decided to accept the invitation. This made Rei very happy, as she felt like progress was being made. However, Sunraku remained cautious and couldn't figure out Siguro's true intentions. After their meeting with Siguro, Sunraku and Enmol continued on their journey. They passed through a tunnel and arrived in the Prismatic Forest Cave area. True to its name, the place was beautiful and filled with various types of plants. However, hidden among this beauty were many giant insects, some of which camouflaged themselves to lure in their prey. Upon reaching the area, Sunraku started gathering materials. He managed to get a nectar sac from an insect that caught his attention. While near a beehive, he witnessed a swarm of bees fighting a huge pincer beetle. After the beetle defeated the queen bee, Sunraku and a.k.a. became the beetle's next targets. To escape the beetle's pursuit, Sunraku threw a nectar sac to lure it away, and then defeated it to collect the materials it dropped. At that time, a group of players who had survived in the cave decided to take on the area boss. This meant that Sunraku, who also wanted to challenge the boss, had to wait until their turn was over. However, he didn't have to wait long, as the group of players was swiftly defeated by the boss. Soon after, Sunraku seized the opportunity and entered the battle. He carefully observed the clown spider boss and asked a.k.a. to stay quiet while he took on the challenge alone, ensuring he wouldn't get injured. At that time, a.k.a. followed his instructions, and Sunraku began his ascent toward the boss's nest. After gaining some levels, Sunraku acquired new skills to help him climb and avoid traps. These skills allowed him to use a net as a foothold and jump while dodging falling objects. When he encountered the clown spider, he quickly slashed its legs, causing the monster to fall. Sunraku also threw his knife to prevent the spider from climbing again. Even though it fell from a height and was hit by various objects, the monster remained active. Eventually, Sunraku defeated the clown spider with close combat attacks. After some time, Pencil then invited Sunraku and Katsuo to meet up. But it seemed like both of them were still busy dealing with their respective area bosses. On the other hand, Rei, when visiting the game shop, told Mana that she had become friends with Sunraku and that he was really impressive. Not only did he make it through the starting city, but he also had the Vorpal Bunny as his companion, which was difficult to tame. At that time, Mana was pleased to hear this and thought that Sunraku might be the first player to defeat a unique monster. After meeting with Mana, Rei coincidentally spotted Rakuro reading a magazine. She quickly hid and observed him secretly. On the other hand, while Rakuro was reading a magazine, he was thinking about his recent meeting with Pensilgan. Pensilgan had invited him and Katsuo to team up and defeat the unique monster called Wizaemon, the Night Watchman. Katsuo was really excited about this collaboration, but Sunraku wanted to know if they had a chance of winning. According to Pensilgan, a player's level didn't matter. What mattered most was their skill in playing the game. After Rakuro finished reading the magazine, Rei approached him. Even though they were in the same class, Rakuro had trouble remembering Rei's name, but luckily he got it right. Rei asked if Rakuro played SLF, and since she played too, it seemed like she wanted to invite him to play together. However, before Rei could say more, Sunraku had to meet with Pensilgan. Shortly after, Sunraku told a.k.a. that in 2 weeks, he would be facing Wizaemon, which made a.k.a. panic. She immediately reported it to her father, and Sunraku was summoned to meet with Fash to discuss the situation. There, Fash asked Sunraku if he was really determined to fight Wizaemon, and Sunraku answered carefully, hoping to get important information about the upcoming battle. Sunraku explained that he would be acting as a helper with uncertain abilities, but his friends were determined to defeat Wizaemon. In that moment, Fash expressed concern, telling Sunraku that attempting something without a chance of winning would be so hard. However, upon hearing that, Sunraku reassured Fash, emphasizing that he and his friends had no intention of losing. He considered it an honor to lend his strength to someone with such determination. After hearing these words, Fash began to share information about Wizaemon. At that time, Sunraku received a clue that their enemy this time was an undead creature. Fash had initially decided not to interfere, but once Sunraku had made up his mind, he was willing to support him. Fash offered to help Sunraku and invited him to his weapons workshop. He requested Sunraku to hand over his Vorpal weapon, as Fash planned to strengthen it. a.k.a.'s brother, Bilak, prepared the workshop, and Sunraku brought the materials he had collected for the reinforcement. With everything in place, Fash took out his hammer and began the process of forging the sword. While Fash was busy with the forging, Bilak mentioned that their father was no ordinary blacksmith. He was an expert known as a master craftsman and an ancient craftsman capable of crafting weapons from a glorious era. He held the prestigious titles of God Craftsman. Every time Fash struck the hammer, a magical circle appeared and infused the weapon, bringing out its true potential. The process of strengthening weapons took a considerable amount of time, but the results were incredibly satisfying. Then, once the weapon was formed, it became much stronger and gained special abilities. However, it was so powerful that Sunraku couldn't use it at its current level. He gathered with his friends again and shared information about Wizaemon. After receiving the latest information, Pensilgan went off to handle other tasks, Meanwhile, Sunraku and Oikazo decided to level up their characters. They used the map given by Pensilgan to explore a labyrinth. Inside the maze, they meet numerous floating objects that reminded them of bugs from the Dregs game. After a little while, they spotted an enemy among the floating objects. There, Oikazo instructed Sunraku to stay quiet as she wanted to showcase her abilities. As expected, she managed to defeat the enemy with just one powerful punch. At that time, Oikazo didn't use any weapons. Instead, she relied on her fist buff to take down her foes. After defeating all the enemies in the labyrinth, they continued to follow Pensilgan's instructions and came across a very deep hole. There, Pensilgan instructed them to jump into the hole, but Sunraku was hesitant, fearing it might be a trap. Not knowing what lay below, Oikazo bravely decided to go first. Once she determined it was safe, she shouted to reassure Sunraku. Fortunately, their journey to the underground area went smoothly. Upon arrival, they used their equipment to lure monsters hiding at the bottom of a lake. Thanks to Sunraku's high hockey statistics, he quickly caught some fish. After a while, Oikazo's bait was also taken, but when she tried to reel it in, she ended up lifting a monster from the lake. Sunraku had prepared a new weapon for this fight. Besides the moon sword that he couldn't use yet, Belak had crafted another weapon with a corrosive poison effect. Each attack with this weapon weakened the opponent's defense, making it easier to penetrate. This enhanced Oikazo's initially ineffective blows, and with Amol's help, they unleashed a powerful combined attack. After defeating the monster, Oikazo gained several new skills. Sunraku, however, just realized that such features existed, and he regretted not exploring more in the first city. Eventually, Pensilgan arrived to pick them up. To prepare for the battle against Wizaman, they needed to meet a unique NPC that appeared only once. The anime ends. The moral lesson from this anime is if you ever feel like your life's a mess, just remember Sunraku battling monsters nearly naked and with a bird mask. It's a reminder that no matter how weird your hobbies are, there's always someone out there fighting virtual rabbits in their virtual underwear and winning.